Right. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Shane. How you both doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Good, good. I'm glad to hear. All right, looks like we're expecting about a dozen or so people on this call, so we'll get started like officially in a moment or so. I would normally have like my FutureFeed jacket on, but I'm Chase Berman, Success Manager at FutureFeed. I'll be leading today's session. I'm really looking forward to speaking with everybody. We'll be going through ideally the first half of the platform, and to make the most out of the hour that we're going to have together, I always encourage people to just please speak up whenever you might have a question or anything that will just help making sure that we're addressing everything that everybody might have questions about, or just general things about the platform that maybe I might not go into enough detail on. I want to make sure that we're able to take full advantage of the time that we have today. All right, so I think there's probably a couple others that we're expecting, but we will get started in about 30 seconds or so. Just as a quick refresher, my name is Chase Berman. I'm FutureFeed Success Manager. I've been with the company a little over 5 years or so. During each of your onboarding, you might have heard from me. Depends if you came through a partner of ours or a direct, but either way, very happy to have you on this session. And I'll be the one leading today's FutureFeed training. We'll be going through the first half of the platform, and we should be able to get through all of this. And again, I absolutely encourage everybody to speak up, ask questions whenever you have them, or you're welcome to add them in the chat as well. Today's session will be recorded. So once the meeting is over, I think a little bit later this afternoon, each of you should get an email from Zoom that will provide the link to the recording. If anybody does have issues accessing it, please feel free to reach out to me at cberman@futurefeed.co or email support@futurefeed.co. And we'll be happy to send you a different version of the recording link in case there's any problems. All right, can everybody see my screen? We can just get like a little thumbs up or verbal yes. Okay, all right, great. All right, so we'll run with the assumption, and I won't say assumption a lot here, but for now, each of you is really just begun your journey in FutureFeed, or if you've had the platform for some time, you'd like to get a refresher on how to really get started within the platform. A couple of months ago, there was a pretty major UI update that we made, and that changed a lot about how the information is being illustrated, really just from, I guess, the perspective of making things more cleaner, more condensed, and less clutter in different sections. Didn't change anything related to the data that you entered in the platform, but it did sort of rearrange a couple of the sections. So it's been some time since we made those changes. I hope everybody's been able to adjust. That was from our chocolate release, I think towards like the middle part of the summer or so. Maybe it was the beginning actually. Either way, when you're getting started in FutureFeed, I want to point out a couple of things at first. The initial thing is the subway map that's in the top middle part of your screen. This is meant to be sort of like your guiding light for entering data within the platform. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to exactly go left to right. And if you break suit from that, you're doing things wrong. That's not the case. It's just giving you a sense of how we could make a form of a recommendation of entering data in the platform, but it's up to you and your team, however you'd best like to use FutureFeed. Excuse me. An example of that would be typically organizations are going to want to go through their gap assessment when they just start out. You can go through the gap assessment in the assess section. And as you're going through all these different controls and realizing, okay, you might need a policy or an access control policy for somewhere in 3.1.1 or somewhere within the access control domain, you might not be adding all of these different pieces of documentation initially, but you can do so as you're identifying these gaps, different tools and services, etc. It's up to you how you'd like to go about this process, but I'll be walking you through a couple of different recommendations that relates to that. Aside from the subway map, you have the ability, depending on the plan that you've purchased, I think about 90% of our subscribers have the DoD contractor CUI bundle plan. So that means you have all the available features and CMMC level 1 controls plus the add-on framework for level 2. So if you click on this the menu icon in the top middle part of your screen, you'll see the drop down, which will have the level 2 and the level 1 view. You can switch back and forth between the views if you would like. All data that's entered in the level 1 framework view will be carried automatically into the level 2 view. Is there a question? Okay. All right. Well, if there are any questions, always just feel free to speak up, but it's not a problem at all or rude to interrupt. I think you'd be surprised how much everybody would benefit from the questions you might have. Right, so there's a lot that goes on in FutureFeed. And again, we'll be walking through the first several sections here, but I'd like to point out one thing for really to help get started. and that's our getting started guide. So throughout FutureFeed, you'll note in pretty much almost every page, you'll see this getting started icon with the green information icon to its left. If you click on that, it's going to give you a lot of information that it's just specifically breaking down the page that you're looking at. It includes the description for various features, but really why what you're looking at is important, why it matters, how to understand the information, and actually entering data within this section or the page within FutureFeed. But it'll break it down into a couple of different ways. So the bluff for the bottom line up front, actual details on why what you're looking at matters, and actually understanding the intent behind, like whether it's control language or just different features on a certain page. This guide is quite robust and lengthy, so we decided to break it down and apply it through all the different pages and sections within FutureFeed. If you're really just getting started in your journey with using FutureFeed, this is probably one of the things I would encourage most above everything. It's meant to help guide you through this process and be your friend using FutureFeed, because we don't expect everybody will just immediately get how FutureFeed operates, especially because we're in this first initial training session. So this is definitely a resource I highly recommend taking advantage of. It'll even go into information about how you can understand whether it's the features or just the data you're entering, evidence you'll be providing, and for how it'll benefit the assessor. So we can't put you in the minds of a C3PAO or a CCA, but they're going to be utilizing the data within Future to ideally go through your assessment and hopefully pass your organization, and you'll get CMMC certification. That might not be for a long time from now, which is okay. So we do recommend taking advantage of all of the sections here. It'll give you a sense of pretty much everything you need to know about FutureFeed, and then also how it can, impact the assessment experience as well. And if there is ever, I guess, a section within the platform or like a feature that you might not understand and there's no supporting resources, meaning there's no green information icons around this information, you can please just reach out to us or email support@futurefeed.co to request more information about that. We'll be happy to add a green information icon throughout the platform. All right, so moving away from the getting started guide, what I would recommend for like your kickoff engagement of using FutureFeed is going into the start section and then intertwining, filling out information in the people section. So we'll get started there. When you click on the start section, you'll be brought to the page that we're on now. This is high-level information about your organization. You're able to have some of this collaborative, whether it's internal between your own organization, or maybe you're working with a service provider. They could be a partner of ours. Having discussion about really defining what your system boundary is, like scoping conversations. You can add information about your contracts and really just setting initial settings throughout the platform as well. So for this company information section, you'll first be adding information. It's really just defining what your organization is. You can add a company logo, add general contact information for your organization. It's just the address of your organization. If you do have multiple tenants within FutureFeed, meaning multiple subscriptions, this company contact information is meant to resemble the address that the tenant is for. So it could be for your headquarters, but if you have another location out in Denver, Colorado, and you have a separate tenant for that, you'd be entering the Denver address for the company. Again, this also comes down to where the scope that it's applying to this tenant as well. For company description, you're going to see, and this applies throughout a lot of sections in FutureFeed, some sections or categories boxes that are highlighted in red. These are required fields. It'll be self-evident as you're going through the platform. So for all of those fields, you will be required to enter information about them. But again, this is really like self-evident information that you would be entering, but you are able to add your NAICS code or codes if you would like to, and add a brief description for the organization as well. We do recommend reading through sort of like the instructions or just guiding information about really what something like company description is referring to, because it might not be what somebody would initially assume. So you'll see the descriptor information throughout the platform. We do recommend reading through that before you enter information. It's going to be important that the information you enter in FutureFeed is correct. For locations, this is where you're simply creating placeholders for where the information is stored throughout your company system, whether it's a physical or electronic data location. Simply come into here, click new location, add the name of the location, an option for adding a description, country the data is residing, the address, and likewise with everything that's related to the address and a phone number as well. And you'll be able to add as many as you would like. to actually view what one of these inventory item cards is like. We call them inventory item cards. This is pop-up that you're seeing here. It also applies to tools and documents. This is where you can add more information about, in this case, the data location. I'll get into connect and task assignments and evidence when we get into some of the other sections in tools and documents. Really has to do with connecting this information to the controls that they're relevant to, creating tasks and actually completing them to create evidence, but having all of that appear in your SSP automatically, which is another big thing I'll get to once we get through the start section here. So you are able to add any notes or just description information that you would like, if you didn't do so in the initial way of creating this particular location. And then one of the other optional features in FutureFeed is setting a rating for this information, or like the item. It's going to appear for documents, likewise for different tools and services, or the items that you're creating within FutureFeed. While it is optional, we do recommend taking advantage of this feature, because this is part of how FutureFeed is going to do more for you than just general compliance management. Sure, you can go through the gap assessment, generate a poem, have an updated and automated SSP, ideally use all this information to, in the future, pass your assessment and continuously manage all this information within FutureFeed. But what about having information that can help your organization, especially some of the executives or managers within your team, actually understanding if the different tools and services you're utilizing are a good fit for your organization? You can add budgeting information and then create subjective ratings for these, I guess, ideally the tools and services. It's going to help give everybody a sense of maybe we actually would consider replacing a different tool or service with something else, or the fact that everything we have is really a great fit for what we're looking to do, meets our budgeting needs or restrictions as well. So you'll see some things that aren't required throughout FutureFeed. We do recommend taking advantage of these features as well. Right, for maintenance and ownership, just 4 questions, really retaining around or referring to the hardware and ownership, general maintenance about the organization. So you're going to be entering or just clicking yes or no for these. And for whatever the answer is, you'll just be entering a brief justification statement as well. So this is, and all of these are required as well. You'll see the asterisk here. A lot of this information you're entering into FutureFeed, but especially in the early stages like this start section, will be carried over into your SSP. So FutureFeed will automate your SSP automatically. So as you're going through the different areas of FutureFeed, pay attention to the asterisks, because it's required, because it's going to appear in your SSP. You do have the ability to customize the SSP. That's part of training session 2 for end users, which I believe won't be this Thursday, because there's a holiday. So we had to cancel that session, but it'll be next Thursday. If anybody would like to have a training session for, I guess, training 2 for this, please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to provide the session to you directly as well. Right, the scoping section. Give this a second to load. So again, this is more high-level information about your organization, but this is where you can really ignite that scoping discussion, describing the system boundary, entering information to describe the overall function or purpose of the system. We actually got a ticket yesterday asking how somebody can add their system boundary diagram into FutureFeed. So a neat trick to that is actually just taking that image or a screenshot of it and pasting that into this box here. You are also welcome to add some additional complementary text, really describing what the image is illustrating, above or below it. Either way, that will appear in your SSP, I think in one of the initial sections of the way we structure the SSP. So if you do want to add the diagram, you can simply just add a diagram document within here and then tag it to the controls it's relevant to. But you're also able to expedite that process and just have it stored here. I find that as a neat trick for this particular area. And for describing the function or purpose of the system, add any information that's relevant to what you would need to articulate here, and that'll be a part of the SSP as well. For sort of taking a step back from this, how does your organization know what scope is actually applying to your SSP or the assessment you're going to have? FutureFeed will not tell you, but you do have the ability to articulate that and just select an option here for what that might be referring to. So an enterprise corporate-wide approach for the scope, maybe it's just a particular organizational unit or a program enclave. It's up to your organization to determine what type of scope you're going to have that your SSP is going to represent. If your organization does have multiple scopes or different system boundaries that will require separate SSPs, you do have the ability to purchase multiple tenants within FutureFeed. You can reach out to me directly about that if that's something that may be relevant to your organization. For the potential impact, this is one of the subjective features that whoever is the primary user for your organization, or if you're going to take a collaborative approach to this, you can talk amongst yourselves to determine what, or I guess how you're going to I guess rate these. This is where I would actually reference the green information icon, where you can learn everything that we're trying to make you informed about that relates to how you can select the ratings for these. Is the potential impact. It's a pretty open-ended thing. So this is where we do recommend taking advantage of reading through the green information icon. That will help with this as well. Likewise, with referring to the Getting Started guide. All right, I know we're about 15 minutes through. We still got a good amount to cover, so I'll see if I can hit some of these other sections at a little bit of a faster rate. I do want to take just a brief pause to go through some of the questions or comments that came in. All right, would you recommend adding all our locations, headquarters, or just CUI locations only? So before I answer this question, I will say now this will be my personal opinion. I would recommend consulting a service provider for this, but for when it's coming to just entering data into FutureFeed, that's where I can give you a better sense of. But this could also be intertwined with, I mean, if you'll end up needing different SSPs. So we can give our advice on this, but I would recommend consulting with the service provider for this. All right, so getting back to actually addressing the question, should you add all of your data locations, headquarters, or just CUI locations only? That is a great question. Personally, I would just have the data locations listed that are, I guess, a part of the assessment scope. So that could be more than just the system boundaries or locations that are containing CUI. Some organizations might be larger and they have a decently sized scope that's going to encapsulate different locations. Or you could have just everything that's on site for your corporate location, and you have CUI within a very tiny sector of that technical, physical, and also the electronic location. But outside of that, maybe in a different room or floor of the company, you're storing documents in a physical sense and like some file folders. So that might not be CUI, it could be FCI, or just different types of information. Whatever is a part of the scope that you're going to define within FutureFeed and have in your SSP. So all of the objective implementation details, how you're actually going to pass your assessment, you're going to need to provide evidence for this. But all of this is coming down to where where your information is being stored. So I'm not going to know the answer to how this will apply to everybody's organizations here, but it doesn't just have to be one type of information. I would really orient this around the information that directly relates to the scoping boundary. And from there, that should give you a sense of what information you can enter for all those different data location cards. So anything else I can touch on for the location question, or just entering data within FutureFeed before I move on? I also will note again, as we're like a little bit into this training now, for some of these questions that might be really like compliance oriented or quite technical, where it gets a little bit past utilizing the platform, I will hopefully always remember to say this will be my personal opinion. So we don't want to overrepresent what a service provider would do or actually guide an organization through. So I can give you my personal opinion, but in the event there are questions that it really should come from an industry certified professional, which I am an RP, but I don't want to overstep, I guess, the service intent FutureFeed has for its customers. I'll just indicate that before I answer the question, but I'll do everything I can to help. Right, for the contract section. So there are two things to note here. One, you're able to enter your cage codes that relates to your organization, but then also enter just like placeholders, just like the data locations, but for your contracts. Enter as many as you would like. So just a title for the contract, option to add a description, an option to add the contract number, the start and end date. Now, all of these except for the title are optional. So it's up to you if you would like to enter data in here. And then you can, I guess, form a relationship between the cage code you entered above into the actual contract that it could be oriented around. And then the different frameworks, this will be revolving around the ones you purchased through FutureFeed. Any of like the FAR, the DFARS clauses, anything related to ITAR and EAR as well. Simply check the boxes here to then really just form the relationship between that information and if it's connected to it in any way, shape, or form. I think there will be a feature coming in a couple of weeks that's going to be, I actually don't have a full sense of what it will be, but it's like an additional thing that you can do for, it's not contract management, but for like primes or the organizations that have like a supply chain. You're able to have, I guess, information entered that you'd ideally be gathering from your subcontractors and then enter into FutureFeed. It's just more supply chain visibility, but I would guess that's probably not going to be relevant to most people here, but it's just something that's coming in the future. For data inventory. So as you're entering different tools and services, you'll be able to define these items as, or the asset category as CUI asset, then other ones that are related to FCI, and then also sensitive data as well. We're looking at the FCI page here. So all of the tools and services that you've defined as an FCI asset, you're going to be able, and also I guess just the general tools and services that are listed in your tenant, you're going to be able to see all of them listed here, but then select them as something that is related to FCI. Simply just click the icon here, and then you'll see it appear here. Now there's 5 different tools and services listed for storing or transmitting FCI. With the CUI asset categorization, it's going to be a little bit of a different feature utilization. So you go to this page, and these are all actually hyperlinked to the CUI registry at the NARA website. But you'll note that there is a couple of numbers and different icons next to some of these boxes. It's because in this sample company that I'm doing this training from, people are clicking through these different sections and then applying multiple items to these different types of CUI, whether it's CUI basic or CUI specified type. If you'd like to learn more about the information, or I guess the certain CUI that your organization may be processing, transmitting, or storing, go straight to the primary source from this page in FutureFeed. But the way you can actually get this information to appear here, which will apply into your SSP, I'll jump into the tools section here because it's relevant sort of to what we're doing. We'll go into the data inventory. So as you're going through the different tools and services you'll create, come into this section, and it's more ways that you can really describe the story behind what this particular tool and service is representing. You'll see for some of these tools and services, the CUI icon is grayed out. You can't click it. That's because the CUI asset category hasn't been selected. So if I were to change that for this particular item, let's give this a second or two to load. It's like my internet could be a little bit better today. So you'll see this icon has now just appeared and it's clickable. When we do so, you're able to see the exact same options that we saw on the previous page. And you can then select the different options that will now be applicable and I guess directly related to just this particular tool or service. And we will go back to the data inventory page. And we'll go back to the CUI section. And for whichever item that I just made the the selection for, and I forget the exact the CUI types that I selected, but you'll be able to see that information appear here as you're updating it in real time. It's a great resource to learn more about the CUI types, but it's also, I just showed you the way that you can make these selections for the different tools or services that you'll be creating. And for sensitive data, sort of similar to how you can create this relationship with the different types of CUI, but for here, you're just going to be able to select, and this is if the sensitive data applies to your organization, read through the different types for this as well, and then just simply select the boxes, and you'll be able to see this appear in the SSP as well. So those are the 3 ways that you can really group together or form those relationships between the different types of information and that your organization may be handling, whether it's FCI, CUI, or in this case, non-CUI commercially sensitive information. I want to jump into the settings section here. So there's a lot of power to this area in FutureFeed. Again, this is a part of your getting started process of entering data within the platform. If you would like to send POEM items or possibly projects that contain multiple POEM items to your ticketing system, or a neat trick here is possibly just somebody's email, you're going to enter that email here. So if I were to add, in this case, this is our support email, you're able to look at a couple examples of what these emails would look like. So when you're in the Your FutureFeed section, you'll see a list of all the different POEM items. If you group them into projects, you can look at projects. There will be, and I'll sort of jump into this section here so you can see like what I'm explaining. On the right side of this page, this is all the different POEM items. There's this email icon. I'm going to email this to the ticketing system that we have now enabled in the start section of the settings area. So you're able to send as many poem items that you would like to this particular ticketing system email. But if you don't want it to go to a ticketing system and maybe just somebody's email on your team, you actually can put in their own work email address here as well. And that's not described here, but you actually do have the ability to do that. It's sort of like a neat underlying trick for utilizing this feature. All right, so for when you're going through the gap assessment, or you might realize that, okay, of course, some objectives aren't going to be met right out of the gate, but you do need to do some work to some policies or procedures. Something's not really right or connected or operating effectively with a certain tool or service. Some work needs to be done to these items. You can create poem items for any of these. Now, you have the ability to set a default due date for a poem item. So in this case, it's set to 3 quarters out. If I were to create a poem item today, the default due date would be 3 quarters away. And you can modify this, change the setting really however you like, up to 2 years out. So it's up to you, however you'd like to make this selection, and you can go back and change this whenever you would like. It's just one of the features that's just going to help really just give you a sense of when you're creating a poem item, what will be the default due date that will initially appear, which you are, of course, welcome to change to something more specific. Along the lines of what will be happening with your poem during the remediation processing and planning. So you've identified all of the gaps, ideally. We're fast forwarding in time from what I'm describing here. You'll be able to set the impact, effort, and cost ratings for a poem item that you'll create. While this is optional, this is another feature that I do highly recommend taking advantage of. FutureFeed will not tell you how you need to structure out the projects that you'll be completing or how you should go about this, but we're going to give you a lot of high-level information to help assist with identifying different ways that you can go about this. More that. Yes, is there a question?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking them up real quick.
The impact, effort, and cost ratings. All right, I'm actually not sure if that comment was it's for me, but either way, we will continue. So for the impact, effort, and cost, these are subjective to your organization, meaning if an organization has 10 people and another has 15,000, the cost metrics are probably going to be a little bit different from what you would assume to be something as very expensive to what would just be a minimal part of your budget. So you're able to fill these metrics out for really however your organization would ideally define something that is very expensive as opposed to not, what would require a lot of like effort, merely from a time perspective, or not, and likewise with how impactful something is to your organization's compliance journey. But this could also be for, you need to update your access control policy. That's really important, or personally, I would say that is. So that poem item could be on like a 3 or a 4 on the impact scale, and it really wouldn't require a whole lot of time. So the effort is going to be a 1 or a 2, and the cost is not going to be a whole lot to do that. So it'd be 1 or a 2 as well. Again, that just comes down to how your organization will be defining these. We'll go back into the Your FutureFeed section because I want to now show you where the impact, effort, and cost ratings appear in your poem. I know we're sort of jumping ahead on the gun here, but these setting functions, they are relevant to different parts of the platform, just so happening to talk about something that's related to one of the last sections. So the impact, effort, and cost ratings, they're here. You do have the ability to change them here if you would like. Let's envision the future, that you've gone through your gap assessment, or at least a lot of it. You've identified most or possibly all of the gaps. You're going to have a decent amount of poem items, 119. That might be a lot more than would apply to a general organization, possibly not. Either way, it would be great to already have a lot of this information appear here when you're coming to Your FutureFeed section for the first time, or maybe just initially. If you don't do the impact, effort, and cost ratings or fill that out when you're creating a poem item, you're going to be looking at the poem items here, sure, but all this impact, effort, and cost information is going to be blank. If you do want to utilize these features to have a better sense of how you're going to group these items into projects, but then also applying that same concept of impact, effort, and cost into your projects, like for this one, for example, there's probably 20 different, or 20, 30 different poem items. It's a part of this project. You can see the Spurs score that your organization will get as a result of completing this project because of the assessment objectives that are a part of this. But this is like a quick hitter project. It's going to be really impactful because of the Spurs score, low level of effort, and the low level of cost. Your organization is going to be able to make these determinations as you're going through the process of, I guess, grouping all these items into projects, but then setting the project ROI for the projects as well. That all comes down to the impact, effort, and cost ratings that you have the ability to set in the earlier stages of using FutureFeed when you're creating your POEM items. So that's sort of like the full circle. And it's like sort of like underlying importance to taking advantage of that as well. Again, that will all start with just setting the metrics here in the settings area. For the framework section, so by default, because we are going through our FedRAMP moderate equivalency process, it is a requirement for us to display the FedRAMP warning banner. If it is relevant to your organization, leave it. If it's not, somebody will need to go through the approval process to then just disable it, and it will no longer appear for the users when they're entering your tenant each time they sign in. But this is just where you're able to set that feature on or off. And by default, it will appear on. Right now we're in the people section. So we talked a lot about different things at a high level in the start section. It will probably take you maybe an hour or two to get through. Just depends how much information is relevant if you already have that. But it's important to understand all the different features that go into some of those sections because that will impact the things you're doing later on in FutureFeed. So we just talked through what could be happening in your FutureFeed section for your POEM. Now for people, whenever we onboard a new tenant, somebody is going to be listed as the admin user. You can have as many users within your tenant as you would like. You can have as many admin users as you would like. Pricing is not based off of that. Given that we're going through this training you've already purchased, maybe somebody's already described this process to you, but you're able to have as many users as you would like. Only admin users have the ability to add other users. So in this case, for sample company, I'm an admin user. So to add somebody, so if it's somebody for your own organization, add them as an employee user. If it's a third party or somebody representing a service provider, you're going to add them as a third party. Adding an assessor user. Now, this is later down the road when you're engaging with the C3PAO, or you'd like to go possibly through a mock assessment. And somebody is going to be utilizing FutureFeed to either mimic or actually conduct the actual assessment for your organization. You can give them assessor access. So that'll give them read-only access to the live SSP and the initial information on the compliance dashboard page, which I know we did not get into a lot of detail about that yet. Once we get through the tools and documents section, I'm going to conclude the training session with that. It touches on a lot of higher level information that would just be a little bit confusing before we get through this information. So there's 3 different ways that you can add user types. I'll just go through the process of adding an employee user. You're going to add their name, the last name, and their email, optional for the phone number. And you're going to select their access type. So when somebody is going to be listed in FutureFeed with no access, that's really meaning that they're not going to be needing to do anything in FutureFeed, but it's important for them to be documented within the tenant because they might or probably will be appearing in the SSP somewhere along how we incorporate the RACI model within your SSP. So it's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. It's going to be up to whoever the admin users are to determine if somebody's just going to be a listed user with no access. But the standard and admin users, these are the ones that have the ability to view any data within the tenant and also modify it / edit it. The difference between these two user types is the admins have the ability to manage other users. So removing them, resending invitations, resetting MFA. Standard users do not have the ability to do so. And then the assessor users, those are ideally going to be the ones that will be only needing read-only mode or access to your SSP in the compliance dashboard page, provided to the assessors when the time comes. Do you have the ability to set timed access for users? Now, this might be relevant for somebody that's just going to come in for a week and then add a bunch of documents, then they're not going to be doing stuff in your tenant afterwards. It's up to you or the admin users who's ever adding the different users for what type of access or the longevity of the access you can give. So like for sample company, we give people access for 30 days after they've gone through a demo. If somebody that you know is always going to be a part of this process for your organization, they're going to be using FutureFeed possibly every day. Set their access to never, and that way their access won't expire in the future. Or you could do so for a year, several months or so. It's up to you. Simply click save when that is done. And then you'll be able to, or that person is going to get an email notification indicating that they've been invited to set up their profile for this company's tenant in FutureFeed. You'll be able to see all the list of users here. Now, this is something that's new that I'd like to point out. Part of the FedRAMP moderate equivalency process that we're undergoing, our assessment is in, I think, early November, so it's right around the corner. Ooh. Users, if they haven't logged in within 90 days, they will automatically be moved to the inactive status. Now, if that happens to somebody and they try to log into FutureFeed tomorrow, they're just going to get a notice on their screen that their account is now listed as inactive. The way for this to be corrected is an admin user or any admin user on your tenant or tenant subscription. It's sort of like the same verbiage, but I'm going to be saying tenant a lot. They'll be able to come down here and view the list of users and then simply click, I think this actually deletes them, which we don't want to do, but you'll go to this little clock icon and this will reactivate the user. So they'll then be able to just simply sign in again with no issues as long as they have their password and MFA credentials. So I do recommend that somebody is checking this periodically to ensure that if somebody does become inactive, if they will still need to be using FutureFeed, that admin user just goes and quickly reactivates them. So they possibly don't reach out to us about getting this reactivated, and then we'll tell them basically everything that I just described. FutureFeed won't be doing this process for you or for an organization. There's a lot of security that goes into this, and we want to protect everything related to our clients. So we will always recommend that the person reaching out to us contacts their admin users or user in the event that they can actually reactivate the tenant or the profile for that user. For managed roles, this is directly intertwined with users, and there's a lot of power to this section aside from just adding different users. So you're able to have as many additional roles as you would like. For every user, we do recommend associating a role to their profile. Now, this will become really important later down the road. So, because let's say that I've been assigned 20 different controls. I'm the accountable person for this, or I'm listed as responsible. I've been assigned a lot of recurring tasks for documentation review, or anything that relates to a certain tool or a service. I'm going to go back to the compliance dashboard page to show you what I'm about to describe. I have a lot of responsibilities to my user profile that can be associated to my roles. Now, in this case, there's maybe 10 different items here for the RACI model. Different tasks that have been assigned in this case, it's just a couple. And the different POEM items. This is giving me direct visibility into the items that I should really either prioritizing my time around or just ensuring that I'm going to be like the sole person that's making sure these things get addressed. But that comes down to the RACI model association I have. So I would having that same mindset for the system and communications protection project, because I'm the accountable person. I need to make sure this gets done. Other people are going to be responsible for ensuring it gets completed. So there could be a lot of data that's going to appear here over time, especially for the tasks, because there could be recurring tasks that you can create and then assign them to different users. Going back to the roles, if I leave sample company a month from now and I have a bunch of different items associated to my roles, it would be a shame if all of those items just disappear from the user association through the role when I'm going through my offboarding process. So I need to be removed from the FutureFeed tenant. To make sure that this information doesn't get lost in the transition of offboarding somebody and then onboarding their replacement, add that new user into FutureFeed first, and then simply come into where that role is, or we'll just use myself, for example, and then select that user from the list of people here. This will ensure that before all the stuff gets removed from my user profile, that it's going to be reassigned to somebody else. So having to then go into 50, 60 different items manually, that can take a lot of time. And also, how do you even know where to find all of these things? It's a lot of searching within the platform that we don't want you to have to go through. So that's why when you're going through the offboarding and onboarding process of different people, be sure to adjust the roles first before removing the offboarded user from the tenant. That's also why we do recommend having roles be associated to every profile as well. So people will be doing a lot of things within the platform, but the roles primarily have more of a tie-in to the responsibilities that people have. And most often, the people come and go within an organization more often than the roles will be changing. So we've taken that concept into account, and that's applicable to how you can execute the role designations in FutureFeed. To add a role, simply just click on this icon, create the role name, add a description if you would like. Then you're going to see it appear down here in this list. Click on the list of different users that can apply, then select them. So you can see here, I'm listed as, like, I have two different roles here. You can have as many roles for a person's profile if you would like to. For any of the default roles, if they're not applicable, simply click on this power button and it'll disappear. You just add a justification statement for that. Just because they are the default roles doesn't mean they all need to be done. We recommend that you fill out as many as you can, and one or a couple people can represent multiple roles. So for the default accountable role, I recommend reading through this, but it's giving you a sense of how you can apply the default role to existing items. So simply for the accountable oversight, and this is where the race model can apply to different objects, which is a lot of different things. You're able to select a certain role that's going to be the default association for the A for all of the items where the race model applies, that accountable person. So that could be for the controls, also for the different tools and services, the documents you'll be creating. Could be a really powerful way to just expedite the process of making that association for a certain role. Now, given it probably won't apply to every single thing, so if it's going to apply to a lot across the board, I do recommend taking advantage of the feature and then just making the changes later on for where that role might not apply. But the role will be listed, the person won't unless somebody's associated to that role. So that's everything related to managing roles within FutureFeed. I know I did just describe a lot for this section. Getting started guide will absolutely help you. Just having a reminder for how to understand this section and really just how to best utilize the different features here. So a lot of what I just described for teams or for roles does apply to teams. So you can apply different users and also roles to various teams. And I'll show you how you can go through that process. To start, you add the team button, create the team name, add the description. Now let's say that's one of the items here. You're going to want to add the different people, assign a team leader as well. So you'll click on the people icon. You'll see this pop up appear. Now you are able to add individual roles to the team. And then eventually when somebody's filled into that role, they're going to be applied automatically. So it's another way that you can utilize roles, so the concept of roles, filling out a lot of initial information in FutureFeed. And then when you have the person that's going to assume that role, just plugging them in, and then it's a lot of different items that's going to appear on their dashboard now. You do have the ability to add people individually, and this is going to be important that somebody at least is added individually as a person for the user here. So that will allow you to then select them as the team leader. You can't just have the roles here and their associated people. You will need to select one of the users that's listed under the people section. As you can see here, there's a couple of different roles here and nobody's associated to that. But even if I add myself, despite Chase Berman being listed as the person associated to this role, I can only select Creighton because he is the individual person that's been applied to this area. So that's how you can add teams, add different people, roles, assign a team leader. But this is one of the early ways that you can expedite the process of forming that relationship to the teams that your organization may or they may not have. If they don't have, you don't need to utilize all of the creation of the population of teams in FutureFeed. But it's a great way to expedite the connection to the different controls these teams are relevant to. I recommend just reviewing this and seeing all the teams that FutureFeed is allowing you to just pre-populate. I won't have your users in there, but just the teams or the list of them. But they're also tagged to the different controls that they're relevant to. You can either utilize the default teams that will provide to you, again, that you can populate them, or you can use this as a little cheat sheet to see the different controls that these different teams are tagged to. So you can create your own and then simply reference the controls that are tagged here and then make the same association through connecting the teams to those controls as well. What this connecting controls function does, and this is a great segue to take us into the tools and documents section. This is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful features in the entire platform. What this will do is expedite the process of structuring your SSP in the format that will help you pass your assessment through benefiting the assessor's view of just understanding how all this information is related to how you can justify the fact that all the objectives for any of these controls is actually validated. That will come through evidence visibility as well, but we'll get through this in the second training session that actually walks through the layout of the structure of the SSP. But all that information comes through these initial sections within FutureFeed, specifically tools and documents, and then everything within Assess. But we're going to get into the tools section here. And I'm going to describe the connecting or the tagging functionality when we get into documents. I think it's a little bit easier to understand there compared to tools. There's also other things in this section that I want to touch on. So we're going to change gears a little bit. Throughout the first 44 minutes of this session, I've been describing things at a decently high level and describing how to get through the features. There's a lot to the tools and documents section. So I will start by saying, please reference the Getting Started guide. with any of the pages that you're on. It's just going to help benefit your process of understanding how to utilize the different features here. There's also a lot of different ways you can visualize this information. This came from the UI update we did several months ago. Give me 1 second to remove that pop-up. So when you click on the tools section, you'll see 5 categories here. So tools and services, specific assets, and vendors. These are the different ways that you can just create place card holders or inventory item cards for these different items. What are the different tools and services your organization is using to operate? Do you have a list of specific assets that you'd like to actually document here? Who are the vendors that you're getting services from? You're able to list all of these here and have different ways to just really define what's the purpose of these different tools and services. What's the vendor providing to you? Is there any inheritance that you will be receiving from these vendors through the tools and services that they're providing? They should have a CRM if the answer is yes to that. I'm going to focus on that particular concept first, because that's going to apply at the objective level and assess. So for any cloud service provider or third party that you're receiving services from, they should probably or may have a CRM that's going to define how they're going to pass on, or I guess, inherit responsibilities for your assessment objectives for your organization. You're going to want to define that and articulate that, list it in FutureFeed. That will start here. So what I would recommend is going into the vendor section, creating the vendor or the particular vendor item. Simply click on this plus icon, create the name for the vendor, and then this will appear here so you can then actually add them. Let's just say we've created this particular vendor. You can add a description for what they're doing. Somebody's going to be the accountable person for them, which we do recommend having associated to every item the RACI model applies. The name of whoever this vendor is. You can add any relevant documentation here. You can add the CRM here if you'd like. I actually wouldn't say like you need to do that here. You don't need to do that. But if you want to make sure that this particular vendor is going to appear within the controls that they're relevant to, and you just want to make sure it's done at the vendor level, go into the connect section, and you'll see that there's the manage tags icon. Simply click the plus icon. Now, this is different ways that you can filter the different controls to appear so you can select them and then have, in this case, this vendor item appear in the SSP underneath the supporting inventory for the vendor section for any of those controls. So right now I've got the control naming filter set. So I type in the word access. Any control that has the word access in its name is going to appear here. And I can select these one at a time or simply do add all for these as well. Same concept will apply for any language in the control description, any, I guess, language in the actual objectives that are articulated for the controls. And same with any guidance information as well. It's just different ways that you can filter different controls to appear. The leaders and followers section, I'm going to, talk more about this when we get into the document section. It's about creating relationships between documents. And likewise with the task and evidence, I'll focus on once we get out of the different tools and services section. And we will be able to get through that. I know we've got about 12 minutes left, so I do want to stay a little bit conscious for time. So you're going to be, it's all what I'm describing now is getting to associate or creating the association for inheritance. So you want to make sure that the vendors are listed here. They're going to be providing a certain tool or service, maybe multiple. You're going to want to make sure that item is listed. So you have the ability to create the overall mission of what this particular item is setting out to accomplish. And the brand or model, that's the name of it. And then you can select what type of tool or service this is. Now, relating back to the vendor, if it's coming from a service provider, you'd be selecting that. Now you'll be able to click on the particular item. Now there are some of the fields will be required, and then you'll see these with the asterisks. Again, take advantage of the ratings. But you'll see here on the left side, right below the RACI model information, that you have the ability to add the customer responsibility matrix, the CRM. You can also add multiple if you would like, but you'd like to ideally select the vendor first, and then make sure that their CRM has been applied here, or as many of CRMs that apply. Now, to actually have the ability to indicate at the inheritance level for objectives in the gap assessment that this stuff will be applying, you're going to want to make sure that this particular tool or service is connected to those controls. I'll just do this for 3.1.1, for example. So we have this particular item. We do know that the vendor is listed and we have the CRM applied. The vital thing here is making sure the CRM has been applied. and the tagging is done. So we're going to fast forward a little bit, go into the gap assessment. And we will scroll down to see the list of the objectives that are here. And going through assess, that's the first part of training 2 for end users. So we won't get into this in a lot of detail now, but I do want to just bring this whole point full circle because it is important to what we're talking about. So the inheritance is right below the objective statement. So we can see that somebody in the past indicated this is partially inherited. Well, we're going to change this to fully inherited because everything the service provider is doing through their tool or service that they're providing, their CRM is indicating that it's completely inheriting the responsibility for ensuring that this objective requirement is being addressed. So to actually apply the CRM here, we can now see that the particular item we were on the previous page, it has the CRM associated and it's tagged to this control. That's why we can now apply this particular item for the full level of inheritance. And we'll note that while these 2 other items are tagged to this particular control, that's why they're appearing here as opposed to the other tools and services, there's no CRM that's associated. It's also part of the reason why we can't actually justify or incorporate this for inheritance. So that brings that full concept into how you can actually set up everything in tools and services to allow you to implement the inheritance at the different objectives for the various controls. Are there any questions about that process? And again, this is being recorded. It will be sent to you afterwards. So you'll be able to refer back to this segment of the training process to see how all that was done. And if you have any additional questions about that at a later point in time, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. So you can create as many different tools and services as you would like. Likewise, with the different specific assets and vendors. See if there's a green information icon here yet. So there's not. Sometimes users will get a little confused as to what they should be adding for the specific assets. It's another area where we do recommend just reading through the information we have under the active assets list. Just going to give you a sense of what's the intended information to have here. Switch over to the evidence tab, and actually it looks like there's not a whole lot here. So we'll see if there is a little bit of stuff here for the different tools and services. You have the ability to create tasks for different tools and services, also documents. Tasks means evidence. When they're completed, you'll have evidence that justifies how any of these items are actually being implemented, all to the support of the objectives that they're related to, especially at the control level. So we can see here on the left, there's 3 pending tasks for Clodai's everyday commercial. It's giving us a sense of there are 3 tasks that they're going to be due at some point in the future, not yet, but they're in the process of being completed. Is somebody actually assigned to these tasks? Do we have recurring tasks for this as well? As we can see, there is a weekly recurring task that's actually not assigned to anybody for whatever this test task is. So I'll actually walk you through the process of creating a task and also a recurring task, assigning it to somebody, and what that approval process looks like, but how this creates evidence that will then automatically be applied into the SSP underneath this particular item. Same will apply for documents as well for the controls that they're tagged to. We already had gone through how you can set the tagging here. Want to make sure that the tagging is done, and I personally would recommend doing so before you get to the task functionality. So to create a new task, you're able to simply just add the title, and it's going to be directly associated to whatever the item you're making the task that it's for. If you want to add some general instruction notes, you can do so for the users, or if the person is going to be assigned to. Recommend just a sentence or 2. It's always best to just help another team member out instead of sort of just leaving them guessing, because it might not be self-evident within the document, or in this case, the tool or service that you're creating the task for. So I do recommend, especially for tool and service tasks, add some general information so they can understand what to do. And you'll notice in bold, there's a lot of roles here, and even some roles without users. This is because in order to assign somebody a task, they need to have a role associated to their profile. This is probably one of the last things that brings back the importance of assigning somebody to at least one role within your tenant. But we will proceed with assigning this to myself. I'm the CRO for sample company. I actually know, or in this case, somebody's creating this task for me. They know that whatever needs to be done for this task, it's going to need to reoccur every month. So you'll see this recurrent summary information appear on the right side in blue. this is where you can sort of play with the task settings a little bit. So we know that it's going to recur every month. I want this to repeat every 1 month on the 30th day of the month, or maybe the 5th. And it's going to start today. So that means we're going to create a task today, and then the next one is going to be created on the 5th of every month. And then when this task is created, there's going to be the effective due date 7 days after it's created. It's going to be really important that the person being assigned this task, especially a recurring task, is notified about this. So if let's just say I were to enter this information here, I'm not going to complete this process now because it's just in sample company. Let's use this example of what we're looking at here to indicate that this has been done. It's now going to be assigned to myself. And I'm going to switch this to myself as well. Making sure that somebody's assigned to the recurring task is going to ensure that every new task that's created for this recurring one in the future is going to be assigned to this person. Now, as I was saying a second ago, getting that user notified outside of FutureFeed, so via email, about the fact that they've been assigned a new task is going to be essential. I think by default, the settings should already be on for this, but I would recommend that everybody goes into the My Preferences section of their own profile. If you have access to multiple tenants, it's applying to everything. You are able to set the cadence for getting a reminder email every day that you've been assigned a new task. It'll just be one email. So if I've been assigned 5 new tasks today, I'm going to get that email every day indicating that I have been assigned X amount of new tasks. For the overdue and past due, or like approaching their due date for tasks, you'll be able to get another email indicating all the tasks that are approaching their due date within 30 days and also those that are past due. It's going to help everybody stay on top of what they really need to be doing from a task perspective. Right. Looks like we are coming up short on time. So if anybody does have an additional 5 minutes or so, I will continue to go on. If you need to hop off, that's certainly okay. I want to make sure that we go through everything for the session. So again, it will be sent to you in the recording. I'm sorry for not really getting through everything as quickly as we had scheduled for this time, but we'll be getting through that. For vulnerabilities, FutureFeed is not a vulnerability scanning tool, but you can upload a vulnerability scan, like an Excel CSV file that you have, into FutureFeed. It will automatically create a POEM item for you, or POEM items, based on the amount of vulnerabilities identified. You can continue to do this over time, and FutureFeed will create new POEM items for you for new vulnerabilities. Let's say I add a vulnerability scan today, 15 new POEM items were created. I do a vulnerability scan next month, and it only has 5 new POEM items or vulnerabilities that are identified. Some of these are, I guess, that's not representing any new or previously existing POEM items that were uploaded or created from a past vulnerability scan. FutureFeed will omit and automatically remove for you any POEM item that was previously created from a past vulnerability scan that's no longer a part of the new vulnerability scan upload. So it's a great way to get all that information in here and be a part of your POEM. For the budgeting section, so probably about 30 minutes ago when I was describing how FutureFeed has optional features that it's just meant to help the organization have a better sense of who they are and how they're operating, this will now go directly into providing budgeting insight. So if these tools and services are working out really well for you, that's great. Well, how much does it cost? What about the ones that are really not a good fit for your organization that you'll identify based on your own subjective ratings? FutureFeed will not do that for you. You're able to add budgeting information to those items. The more information you add for the different tools and services, the more information you're going to see here. Now, to get more details about this, we break the budget down into 4 different sections: technology, support, internal, and external. And you can actually export this information if you'd like, just by clicking here. But it's a great way to have primal insight into what is the ongoing cost for your organization to just operate with the different tools and services and other things that you'll be purchasing in order to become CMMC compliant, or possibly with other frameworks once FutureFeed has them in the coming months. It can be a really valuable feature that can be very helpful to various people. It just depends if you want to utilize that optional feature. And I want to go back into the tools and services section to finish out a couple of different ways that you can visualize this information. We haven't touched on management data yet. So these are more optional features that you're welcome to take advantage of. So you can set the productivity rating either here or by clicking on the items. And then let's let this load and then setting it here. If I were to move this item into the draft status, meaning a POEM item is going to be created for this, Let's give us a second. The ratings will change now to impact, effort, and cost, like you can set for any poem item. Do recommend going through the 10 seconds or so to identify if making sure that getting this back to the active status, meaning no work needs to be done to it, can be done. Setting the impact, effort, and cost ratings here. One other thing I'd like to point out is for the tools and services, you do have the ability to enter the user count. So the various end users that it applies to and those that are privileged users, like admins for the certain tools and services. Now, before we move past here, I just want to conclude the process of what I was talking about for creating tasks. We walk through that process, but how are you going to be able to see the fact that the tasks that you're creating are actually being completed? So the email that a user would get, let's just say I clicked on that, it'll hyperlink you and take you back into this page that you're seeing right here. Now for a tool and service task, you do have the ability to just add a new document or just upload a piece of evidence if you would like to, or just link it. Let's just say we're going to go through like creating a new document for this. And I'm just going to go say everything was done. There's two things I'm going to describe here. So if I'm the one that's going to be making sure this task is done, nobody else needs to approve it. I would just go to the save and then the save complete. That will be ensuring that I'm now able to create this task into evidence in FutureFeed that's directly associated to this particular item. If the tagging is set, that is what's going to have any piece of evidence that you've created through tasks, just for what we're talking about here, apply to those controls within the SSP directly underneath those particular items. So when the assessors are going through the review of all the controls in your SSP, they'll be able to see, okay, you've marked these objectives as met. We have the implementation statements. Where's the evidence for this? They're going to want to see the list of associated tools and services and documents. But because you're creating your evidence through this task management process, they're going to see all of that right underneath everything. And you'd be surprised of how little amount of questions they'll be asking you just revolving around getting the information to them. We've taken that into account through the SSP structure build out in FutureFeed. Before I show you what that looks like, I want to describe one other thing with this. So the multi-approval process for getting the signature for somebody within your organization for a task. In this example, let's say I'm not the final person that needs to do this. I'm going to go through the initial stage of reviewing whatever this task is. The exact same thing applies to documents. I can reassign this task to somebody else. So right now it's assigned to me under my CIO role. I'm going to reassign this task to, let's see if, well, there's nobody else listed here for the roles. So we're just going to assign it to this new role. Let's use our imaginations to assume that somebody else is listed here. I'm going to click Save in Progress. So now this person is going to get a notification or an email from FutureFeed indicating they've been reassigned this task. So they'll be able to follow that hyperlink, come straight back into here, and they'll be able to see, or they'll be brought straight into this view for the task. They can go through their own review process, and let's fast forward, say that's done. They're now going to go into the Save Complete section, add any implementation notes if they'd like to. But the key thing here is they're going to be adding their virtual signature. So whoever is the final approval person or entity within your organization, where their virtual signature is going to be either desired or you will need to have it for the evidence, follow that process in FutureFeed, and you'll be able to ensure that all of the evidence are dated. You can see who they were completed by, and then also capture the signature of that person as well. So there won't be a need to use like DocuSign or any of those other things anymore. You can do all of this within FutureFeed. So we just talked about a really big process here. So creating the inventory items for the supporting inventory. The exact same thing applies to documents, which we will get into in just a minute. But utilizing the tagging functionality, which will ensure that these items are listed, likewise with all of the evidence associated to these items as well. So we've been looking at Cloud Eyes Everyday commercial, and there's two pieces of evidence that we can see on 3.1.1. Now, I don't want to just go to another section without showing you like the fruits of your labor for this process. We'll go into the SSP section under Requirements Detailed Plan. The first control we're going to go to is 3.1.1. I like for everybody to visualize what we just did and how this will automatically be incorporated into your SSP. We'll scroll down here go past the objectives, the implementation statements, etc. These tools and documents, everything in tools and documents here, if they're tagged to the controls, in this case 3.1.1, that's why you're going to see them appear here. And we'll break it down into the different sections as well. So I think Cloud Eyes Everyday Commercial is what we were doing. We completed a couple of tasks and we saw those 2 test tasks. That's going to directly be associated underneath these items. So if you give the assessor user access, they're going to be able to click through your SSP just as I'm doing, and then be able to visualize all this information if they would like. If they'd like to actually see the document, or in this case, the particular inventory item, they can click on it and then see the information. And they won't be able to edit anything. It's just read only. But all the information that you're going to add in here, they'll be able to view themselves as well. And for documents, be the same process, just by clicking on any of those things, and they'll be able to view the document as well. But for this acceptable use policy, this is the exact same thing I was talking about for tools and services. You're able to have that monthly review task appear here in the form of evidence. And for any item that you do have, whether it's a recurring task or just a one-off task, evidence to support how any of these items are actually helping with justifying everything related to the objectives that they're associated to, it's going to be mapped out here. You won't need to create your SSP manually anymore. All right, I see a question just came in. Let's take a quick pause for this. Can you give everyone on a team task? I need to expand this a little bit so I can see. Can you give everyone on a team a task and get everyone's signature? So you won't be able to capture everybody's individual signature on the task. That is something that's coming in the future. I don't personally know exactly when. I would assume late this year or Q1 of 2026. So the process that I just described for that multiple approving person or people to do this, whoever is going to be having that hierarchical, primary representation of the approval process for the signature, you can follow the example I went through. But for getting multiple signatures on the document, that is where I would say have that document exist in FutureFeed, but then send it to DocuSign or something else that can capture everybody's signature until we have the feature capability that directly supports this question. It won't add a bunch of additional time, but it's just a process that for now needs to be done outside of the platform. But if you have the ability to for somebody to copy and paste their signature in the document, you can add that in there. Could create multiple tasks for this and just build on itself. But that I would personally say is going to add more time to your process, as opposed to just sending it out to multiple people to get their signature on the same document. It's up to you how you'd like to use that particular feature in FutureFeed. All right, I want to take us back and now focus on the document section because we're 8 minutes over. So this is actually taking a little bit longer than I thought. I'm sorry, I kind of just get into the weeds of stuff sometimes. But this is important information. I want to make sure that everybody that's still here, I know a couple have dropped off, that I really appreciate your extra time. Again, everything will be recorded and sent to you afterwards, but now we're getting into the other juice to I don't even know how to conclude that sentence. I ran out of the metaphor, but bear with me here. All right, so in the document section, you'll have 3 different ways that you can categorize your documents. So working documents, reference documents, and reviews and assessments. You can create different subcategories for these different types of documents that you're able to do so here by clicking on this plus icon for any of these areas. So policy, plan, procedure, worksheet, all the different documents you're able to view in working documents, reference documents, notice the different headers here. Any past reviews and assessments that you'd like to just add into your FutureFeed tenant if you'd like to. FutureFeed will provide 57 documentation templates that come complimentary with your subscription. It's meant to be a really good starting basis for an organization that may not have either any or a lot of documentation templates. You would still need to go through the implementation process for them, but they do come pre-tagged to controls. So if you already have your documents, but you're not sure which specific controls that they refer to, just reference the list of documents here. You can see all the controls they're tagged to. This is literally giving you the list of the controls that you can tag the documents that you already have, which just add them into FutureFeed as a live document and then tag them. It's part of the way that we can help expedite the process for you if you elect not to use the documentation templates that FutureFeed provides. That's how you can populate the documents, just like you can populate teams. A couple different ways you can view this information in list format. You can either take it in alphabetical order and starting with the active documents and then going down to the draft documents. There's a two-step deletion process, or really a three-step deletion process for this information, because this data can be really important to organizations, and it'd be a shame if you click one button and then it's just gone. Poof, it's disappeared. Taking that into account, and that will not happen in FutureFeed. So to delete a document, you can first click on this archive button. Now you can come down to this archive section, see the different items that have been archived. To then delete it, click on this icon. You'll get this notion that it's going to be permanently removed from the system. Somebody will then need to then click this delete button and it will disappear. Now this is a sample company, so I actually can delete this. I'll do so here. Like that's just taking a second to load, or maybe okay, it's something's a little funky on my side right now, but it will, yeah, so it just disappeared. So it will delete the document. We really recommend being careful when it comes to that. If something does disappear and you'd like to really restore it, reach out to us. We would need to go through a couple of loops because we'd no longer have the same amount of access to the data that's in the company's tenants because of the FedRAMP model equivalency process we're undergoing. So it will take us a lot more time than it did in the past to then identify the information and then recover that to your tenant, but it is still technically possible, but it's a big loop that we need to go through. Right, for managing documentation, and we've already touched on the RACI model, the connecting to controls for tagging. You do have the ability to add general notes to the documents just to give people a sense of really what the documents are doing and what they're referring to. There are two ways to manage documents in FutureFeed, either adding them as attachments, which is, in my opinion, the secondary way to do this, because it's not live documentation management that you can do in FutureFeed. Now, before the GRC world came around, organizations had all their documents stored in their SharePoint or OneDrive. You're going to be creating different versions of that. It could be like 10 different files representing the same document, but how do you know which one's actually up to date? You can actually select the wrong one and then submit that for something where now it's incorrect, it's invalid, something negative may happen to the organization as a result. We recommend utilizing the live documentation editor in FutureFeed to avoid this. You'll always be referencing the primary document or the most up-to-date version, but you might go through a compliance review process with any of these given documents. You could be making substantial changes to them or something that's really going to impact what is this document is indicating it's doing. So any change that I'll make to these documents will change automatically. It has added a few words here for a test. All of this saved. But you can create a new version of the document if you like by clicking on that publish icon. You'll note right above this, we're now on version 5 that was updated at 1:12 p.m. I'm in Central Time right now on Tuesday, September 30th. You have the ability to restore previous versions of the document if you'd like to. You can see the person that created it, who it was last updated by, and then restoring it if you would like to. It's a great way to have an expedited process for documentation management, but ensuring that you no longer have a bajillion different file versions. Everything that you're looking to see at any time, it's always going to be the most up-to-date version in FutureFeed, but you can also restore a previous version if you'd like. It's like having those additional files, but it's all just one virtually. Give me a second to take a sip of coffee there. You have the name for the document, the RACI model. Again, we recommend having the accountable person. Set the next review date. This is like the compliance review cycle. And you'll be able to see that under the compliance review section for anybody's personal dashboard. Now, at this point, we've talked about tagging a lot, and also with the task assignments and management process, creating evidence. Let's now run with the assumption that this is a part of your process for creating all the different documents and tools and services in FutureFeed. If you're going to be doing that, thumbs up to you. Great. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier using the platform. Because now this is getting into the continuous management processes of keeping your information up to date in FutureFeed well past you passing your assessment. You'll be going through your assessment every 3 years, but there may come a time when you might need to prove your compliance at any point in time. It's literally the third portion of our tagline: attain, maintain, improve at any time. What FutureFeed is really here to help you do past passing your initial assessment is maintaining everything in a very expedited fashion. That's why we recommend utilizing the recurring tasks, but you can do so here, making sure that the tags are still accurate, and just go through a review of that every now and then. but understanding how all this information relates to itself, where it's creating that relationship between data, all to go into making sure that you have an up-to-date version of your SSP at like literally any time. That is like the beautiful thing of using a platform like FutureFeed, and especially if you've utilized the features that I've specifically taken the time to go into a lot of detail on for this training session. The tagging will be your best friend. Likewise, the rest of our team and the platform itself, but making sure the tagging is utilized, recurring tasks are utilized as well. And your evidence is going to be associated to this, like the particular items individually, and let the magic and the automation work for you. It will appear in your SSP. There are some other features, some really small ones that we didn't really get into a whole lot here. I wanted to touch on everything at a high level, and then the really vital things at the, or personally, I think the really vital things at the deeper level. But this is where I would also refer back to the getting started guide now that you're in the document section, especially if you haven't done much work here. For the evidence status, we talked about this in the tools and services section, but this is a great way to have a different lens for understanding all the different tasks that have been associated to these different documents. Red indicates these tasks are overdue. Might want to be spending some time making sure those get addressed. Orange, all the ones that are going to be completed in the past. And then one for that's referring to, or sorry, the green one that's indicating there's one piece of evidence for the cybersecurity policy. So ideally, everything is meant to encapsulate the documentation that your organization is utilizing to effectively operate. Policies could be referencing procedural processes, and you'll have separate documents for them, but you're creating the picture for not only all the different tools and services that you're utilizing within your organization, but the internal processes that you're following through documentation implementation, making sure that you have recurring evidence and up-to-date evidence to indicate that all of those things are being done accordingly to how your organization is supposed to operate. This goes directly into supporting the implementation statements for the objectives, to be a great place to pick up on for training too, for end users. I would love to take up more time from everybody's afternoon, but we're about 17 minutes over, so I do need to conclude the session at this time. A couple of things to bring this back full picture. The more information you enter in FutureFeed, the more you're going to see in this compliance dashboard page. All of this is a reflection of the data you've entered and assessed, but then all the different tools and services, associations of documents that you can make via the RACI model, that's going to be visible in the individual responsibility dashboard, team's responsibilities dashboard. The assessment prep center is a great way to just assign different people to various sections throughout FutureFeed. Again, the Getting Started guide will walk you through all of these different areas. It's here to help you throughout your process, especially using FutureFeed early on. I need to take a break and catch my breath after all of this. But for those of you that are still with me, I really appreciate your extra time. I hope this training session was valuable today. My name is Chase Berman, FutureFeed Success Manager, here to help through everything that I and the rest of our team can through using FutureFeed, but especially in the early stages of implementing the platform, really for the longevity of your compliance management process. All right, I'm going to stop here. And
thank you, Chase. Thank you. Very good. Take the rest of the day off.
all right, I'd love to. But I still got a lot of important work to do. Thank you, Steve. And everybody else that's here, I really appreciate your extra time and hopefully look forward to engaging with you on a more personal level going forward. For the next couple of weeks, I will be doing our training sessions, or like half of them or so. So if you're on those in the future, I look forward to seeing you there. For everything we've gone through today, I'd recommend taking the next week or so to implement those processes before you, I guess, attend training 2 for end users. So it's going to be building on a lot of what we've already talked about, but we won't go into that level of detail for those prior sections. We might summarize a few things, but that's just my recommendation for future training. All right. Yeah, so the recording will be sent to everybody a little bit later this afternoon. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Again, thank you very much for the extra time. Right, have a good one, everybody.
You do the same.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everybody.